Hey everybody, Jonathan Broadbent here, your host of UnWoke Academy. Welcome to another episode. First thing, if you were following the 100-100 party, we're at 126 days, 6 hours, 12 minutes, and 28 seconds. That's the countdown until 4th of July. At that point, I will be moving everything that I've worked for decades to build from regulated to unregulated, and connected to that is the launch of a private membership association. And my hope and dream that a lot of people within finance get out there and form PMAs and get out from under this crazy leftist cabal who are running things. They're awful, and they have the ability through these weaponized regulators, these three-letter agencies, to tighten the thumb screws and force people to do their will. We saw it with doctors and medical staff all throughout hospitals with COVID. We see it happening in schools. Suddenly, it's like a switch flipped, and we've gone from education in schools to what I call ABE, or anything but education. And the same is happening in finance. Finance used to, at least there was a veneer of pretending at least to care about the individual. But at this point, we're just siphoning money out of 401k plans and things like it, and doing horrible stuff like sending it into communist China and propping up stock prices of companies that are doing horrible things. It is egregiously awful, and it's time for us to step up and fight back. If you are not already aware of a newspaper called the Epoch Times, this newspaper is one that I've grown to be a big fan of. So I get this paper, both print and digital. You can get either or both. And without further ado, I'm actually going to try something a little bit different here because this is so important. I'm actually going to read an article from this because I don't want anybody to miss it. So I've been hearing about this issue, I've been following it, and I don't believe that anybody has put it as clearly. Jack McFerrin writes, "Your property rights have been taken in all 50 states. Here's how to get them back." So I know a number of people who work in legislatures all across the country, and I'm encouraging people to be aware of this issue. Among others, certainly, we talk about CBDC, that centralized banking digital currency, and the impact that that portends to our ability to simply go and purchase something and have cash. It's outrageous what the left have planned here. And we fight back against CBDC and CEI, that's corporate equity index, etc. So nothing's changing there, but this needs to be on our radar. So without further ado, I'm going to share this article with you. Spurred by the release of former Wall Street hedge fund manager and financial expert David Rogers Webb's groundbreaking expose, The Great Taking. Look that up and research it. You don't use Google. Switch to Brave. I like Brave much better. But do some web searches and look into The Great Taking. And by subsequent research verifying Mr. Webb's claims, lawmakers in South Dakota have introduced legislation that seeks to protect their citizens' fundamental property rights. So think about it. We're Americans. If you're listening to this, then you're either American or interested in all things Americana, or maybe, hopefully, have some desire to get into the freedom that America has to offer. And all of those freedoms right now are on the chopping block. So people like me are engaged in the fight to demand and claim our continued freedom, liberty, rights, and autonomy. So, while sources tell us that several other states are considering similar legislation, this is something that all states must prioritize because this issue completely transcends traditional party lines. Important laws in all 50 states have been added to state codes over the past 3 decades, specifically with provisions dealing with Article 8 of the Uniform Commercial Code, or UCC for short. These laws, drafted and propagated by the influential Uniform Law Commission in tandem with the powerful banking lobbyists, were seemingly deliberately designed to revoke Americans' private property rights, specifically those related to investment securities, such as those held in IRA and 401k accounts. That's my bailiwick. I am an ERISA subject matter expert. I've worked for decades, all the way from coast to coast, north to south. I've worked on what are referred to generally as workplace retirement plan. That is where I've made my bread and butter. That's where I've designed and built my career. And that's the company that I launched independent when I left Wall Street to work on those types of things. So this to me hits a sweet spot of just extreme concern and anxiety about the monkeying that these really bad people are intending to do to us, and actually to a great extent have flown under the radar, changed laws, rules, and regulations in order to artificially influence us and our lives. Essentially, the world's largest financial institutions, quietly preparing for the event of a major financial meltdown, successfully lobbied state legislatures to change the way that collateral is held under state laws. Among other things, these efforts have given creditors in the form of too big to fail, banks and other powerful financial interests, priority claims over all wealth stored in investment securities, such as in stocks, bonds, mutual funds, exchange traded funds, 401k accounts, IRA accounts, and other types of securities, instead of the security purchaser. So let me pause and translate that. What we're talking about is the actual ownership, and it gets into the detail a little bit more, and I'm going to let the author do the speaking because it's well written. Follow my Substack. I'll put a link in the show notes, unwoke.academy. That's the easiest way to find me, and that'll direct to the Substack. In there, I'm going to put a link to this article. If it's behind a paywall, I suggest just try I think there's a free trial. Try Epoch Times. You're really going to like it. I've sworn by it for years. It is actually intelligently written. That appeals to me as well. But when it gets into private property, there are all kinds of different rights that can be assigned, especially when you're talking about the way that securities are purchased. And stocks, or securities for short, it's another term for it, stocks can be held lots of different ways. And when a mutual fund is buying them on your behalf, what you may not know or may not take the time to realize is all of the layers and ownership structure in between you and that eventual security. So let's say that it's we'll pick on some of the woke companies that like Microsoft and Apple and Disney and Target and Bud Light, which is actually Anheuser-Busch. Those stocks can be held inside of a mutual fund, but who actually has seniority, the actual rights to that is in question. And according to everything that I've been learning about recently, those rights have been secretly sort of spirited away and have been given a priority, I should say, has been given to the creditor and not you, the buyer, the owner, which is crazy. So it gets into a little bit more detail. Hopefully that becomes clear and understandable. After reading The Great Taking, I was highly concerned. And after I reviewed the primary documents, Mr. Websites examined the writings of legal scholars analyzing the changes to Article 8 of the UCC, studied the relevant provisions within the UCC that have been changed, and confirmed that states have uniformly adopted these new provisions. I found that Mr. Webb's claims have proven to be completely accurate. Again, I'm reading here. These are the words of the author of the article. He has gone through the same steps and similar steps that I have been going through to understand the legal elements of ownership. And ownership in this case, specifically to your portfolio, your investments. So if you have a 401k plan and I touch consult on and advise a vast array of different types of 401k plans and things like them. And in fact, a couple of different companies that have a major sort of contact to the overall marketplace in many, many states. So I am keenly interested in this stuff. From a legal standpoint, much of what we believe to be our wealth is not, in fact, ours. And in the event of a financial crisis, which seems more and more likely with every passing day, we could lose everything to the too big to fail financial institutions. It's important to clarify that when I say we, that truly means everyone who holds any type of investment security. No one is exempt from this potential taking from the least wealthy to the most affluent members of society. To put this in simpler terms, consider the following example. If you were to contact your broker today to purchase 10 shares of a certain company, Google, for example. So this author is doing the same thing I'm doing, picking Wokadoodle stocks. I hope you don't own any of these personally. And I hope that you go on Woke and eliminate all of them from your life. But that's just me. So imagine you contact your broker in order to purchase 10 shares of Google. Your broker would then add those 10 Google shares to your account. You would probably think that you would own those 10 Google shares, but you wouldn't. What you would actually own is a security entitlement to shares rather than the underlying shares themselves. This is explicitly stated throughout Article 8 of the UCC. A security entitlement is basically a contract with your broker that grants certain rights to a specific type of security, meaning that when you purchase, you own only certain contractual rights to it rather than the security itself. This is bad enough on its own, but the problem is actually far worse. I'm pausing for a moment just to clarify. I know in the world of finance, the use of terminologies can get a little bit confusing when we talk about securities. Securities is just sort of a basic blanket term meant to represent anything that could be bought and sold. Mutual funds and exchange traded funds and things like them are just an easy way of hiring a manager to do those selections for you. So you don't have to go out there and decide which companies to buy and sell and when. But at the end of the day, you want to assume, we all should have the right to assume that when you buy it, you actually own it. What this is saying, and what we're starting to figure out, unraveling all of the legal nuances of this Article 8, is that that is not necessarily the case, and that in the event of a financial meltdown, that all of a sudden the rights go first and foremost to the creditor, which is not you. Under UCC Article 8, protected creditors of securities intermediaries, such as the world's largest banks, are given priority ownership to security entitlements if they use the customer's assets as collateral. Remember 2008? All the collateralized mortgage obligations and derivatives and all those sorts of things. That was one of the key, that was at the crux of that whole issue in 2008. I was at a Wall Street firm and lived through that, really within Wall Street, and I saw the insides and the underpinnings of it. I saw the underbelly. It's gross stuff. What this means is that if your broker were to go bankrupt, your broker's secured creditors would be given priority over what you thought were your security entitlement. You would become an unsecured creditor, and your claim to your securities would be at the very back of the line in the event of a widespread financial crash. Millions of investors could lose everything to those secured creditors. Think about that for a moment. Think about the money that's controlled, owned, and the wealth that percolates around in these mega globalist firms. They have created an environment where they are at the front of the line in the event of a financial collapse, which means if we thought the 2008 bailout was bad, and then all of that goofy quantitative easing that happened afterward, this is designed and set up to potentially be thousands of times worse, millions of times worse. This stands to potentially make 2008 look like child's play. A lot of us lost a lot of money, and then we regained it in, I will argue, a lot of it's just fictitious numbers and inflated valuations. But on paper, at least, we sort of reclaimed. This is saying that that paper could, in the event of a financial collapse, effectively become moot and meaningless. It goes on. In fact, this exact scenario has already occurred, albeit on a smaller scale. When Lehman Brothers filed for bankruptcy during the 2008 financial crisis, one of its primary lenders, JP Morgan Chase Bank, was able to take all of Lehman's accounts as collateral for the loans that Lehman couldn't pay. JP Morgan was legally allowed to do this because it operated as Lehman's custodian. So that gets a little technical. They're custodians. It's a term that we use often in finance to refer to a financial organization that actually does the holding and trading of securities, basically. So oftentimes you'll have a 401k plan, and the company that you see and are interacting with is not actually the company that's holding and doing the trading. So sometimes, and that goes back to my earlier comment, there may be a few layers between you and the actual ownership of those stocks. One of the things that I'm looking into is whether or not individual securities ownership, and those are self-directed brokerage windows, if that may be a way out of this. I'm thinking it may be the case, but that depends on who the custodian is, who the actual transaction it occurs with. I'm hopeful and pursuing that route as a way to maybe get money removed from harm's way in this circumstance. The article goes on from there, and it talks about the great taking in great detail, and it talks specifically about some state level regulations and some bills and code that can be added at the state level to counteract this. So I'm just going to put one simple sort of caveat in there. The strange thing about this structure, although we're dealing with some sort of national and global level financial firms, actually at this point, I think it's fair to say most all of them are global in nature or globalist. Although we're dealing with them, the regulations that allowed for this and created it in the first place were done on a state by state basis, which means that unwinding it and putting up some blocks to protect the individual consumer can take place and should and will take place at the state level. We've got a fight ahead of us because these horrible, sinister demons, these terrible people who created this, I suspect with the intention of slurping up and taking vast, effectively all wealth, to just take all wealth from all humanity. It's so diabolical and sinister in nature. um, they're not going to go easily. They will lobby, they will fight, they will pressure, they will probably do whatever it is that they do in state capitals all across the country. They will allegedly blackmail, threaten. I don't know what all they're capable of, but this is where we, the people, need to step in and talk to our state legislature and make immediate action. If you have a 401k plan, an IRA, a brokerage account, a trade online account, if you have something somewhere that owns some securities and you've got an investment portfolio, this stands to impact you. At a minimum, read this article, maybe pick up that The Great Taking, the book, read up on it, do some of your own research, talk to your lawyer friends, and see if you find people that agree or disagree. I'd be happy to hear back from you. I am at the point now where I'm in agreement with the things that are stated in this article. I'm finding the same things. That said, I want to give a quick tip of the hat to our great friends at OBBM Network and BlessedNewsTV.com. They're extraordinary partners to work with and collaborate to get this content out and shared with the world. We're on a number of different platforms now. I'm thrilled. I think we're approaching 5 million views, which is awesome. Thank you. I'm very honored to have gone from 0 to 5 million in what has it been, 5 months. So that's amazing to me, especially being a financial show. We're not known to be the most exciting, but we're catching some attention. I'm glad because I hope a lot of people are out there getting onto the path to go unwoke. If you like our content and want to support us, just know that you can find us through unwoke.academy. There are subscription options, anything that you can do to help encourage and support future research like this and keep this podcast continuing is greatly appreciated. And if you are in these globalist firms, these far left wackadoodle, wokadoodle investment firms, what used to be kind of the Wall Street, but they've turned their back on us, the citizens, if you're with them, please go unwoke. Let's get on the path. What is it? The journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. You don't have to do it all at once, but just start with the intention of getting out of BlackRock and getting out of Vanguard and getting out of those big firms that have set the intention of going woke and moving into ESG. And I say overwhelmingly, maybe not completely, but overwhelmingly show the intention of taking our Western values, our US based dollars, our hard earned money, and sending it overseas and pumping it into places like communist China and into these globalist companies that we don't like and you shouldn't want in your portfolio. We don't want money going into big tech, big pharma, and big government. Let's redirect that and get it into encouraging we the people of the world. I'm Jonathan Broadbent, your host of UnWoke.Academy. This has been another episode. Stay tuned.